Everyone avoided the bull, a terrifying beast feared by all, except for a homeless man who walked right up to it and whispered its name. What happens next will leave you speechless. The roar split the evening air like thunder rolling down the valley. Men drinking outside the tavern froze, their mugs halfway to their lips, as the sound ripped through Blackthorn Hollow. The reinforced pen at the far edge of town shook with the force of the bull's fury, the heavy timbers groaning as if they might snap. Dust rose in clouds around the posts, and even from a distance, the beast's shadow loomed, thrashing against the boards with the weight of an avalanche. No one dared move closer. Not a farmer, not a ranch hand, not even the sheriff's deputies. All of them stood stiff with fear, their eyes fixed on the monstrous silhouette that seemed to embody every nightmare they had whispered about for weeks. The bull, Ironhide, had already taken 2 men's lives at the ranch he came from, and even the strongest among them admitted that it was only a matter of time before someone else met the same fate. "Mad thing's gonna tear the whole pen apart," muttered Thomas Yule, a wiry farmer clutching his hat against his chest. His voice cracked with nerves, his eyes flickering between the tavern doors and the swaying fence. Sheriff Jonas Crow stood with his broad shoulders squared, his hand resting on the butt of the revolver at his hip. His jaw tightened as another roar burst forth, shaking the boards again. "That beast is more trouble than he's worth," he growled. "Should have put him down the day he came here." His deputies nodded, but none of them stepped forward. The men of Blackthorn Hollow clustered together, their boots grinding against the dirt road, the orange glow of lanterns casting long, trembling shadows across the ground. The air carried a tension so thick it felt as though the whole town was holding its breath. Mothers pulled their sons away from the fence, and older men who prided themselves on courage refused to meet one another's eyes. The bull's rage was not something any of them wished to challenge. And then, as if the fear of the crowd had conjured him, a figure moved silently across the square. Elias Thorne. The men noticed him only when he stepped out of the darkness near the tavern wall, his frame thin beneath his tattered coat, his beard untrimmed and streaked with gray. For years he had lived like a shadow in Blackthorn Hollow, sleeping in alleys or barns when kindness allowed, eating scraps when luck favored him. Most men dismissed him, some mocked him outright, but Elias never raised his voice or his fists in return. He was simply there, like a piece of furniture too broken to throw away, too stubborn to rot. Now, however, as the bull's fury rattled the pen, Elias did not cower. He did not retreat with the others. He walked. Boots worn thin scuffed against the dirt as he crossed the square, his steps unhurried, his face unreadable. The crowd stirred, their whispers sharp with disbelief. "What's he doing?" hissed Rowan Pike, a young stable hand whose wide eyes followed Elias like a boy staring at a ghost. "Lost his wits," Thomas muttered. "That's suicide." Sheriff Jonas narrowed his gaze. He said nothing, but his fingers tapped against the handle of his revolver, as if even he sensed the unease threading through the moment. Elias reached the edge of the pen. The timbers loomed high, nailed together by men who had prayed they would be strong enough. Behind them, Ironhide snorted like a forge, steam rising from his nostrils, muscles rippling beneath his dark hide. The bull's eyes glimmered in the lantern light, black and furious, locked on the thin figure daring to approach. The crowd shifted closer, drawn against their own will, unable to look away. "Elias!" someone shouted. "Step back before he tears through!" But Elias did not step back. He leaned gently against the rough wood of the post, his hand pressing flat against the timber as though steadying himself against the storm. His lips moved, quiet, the words carrying only a whisper. No one heard what he said, but Ironhide did. The bull's head jerked, nostrils flaring. His hooves, which had been tearing divots into the earth, slowed. The heavy chains clanking at his shoulders stilled, their echo dying into silence. A hush spread through the onlookers, one broken only by the distant chirp of crickets beyond the town. Then, impossibly, Ironhide lowered his head. A sound rose from the crowd, a collective gasp that seemed to shake the air. Men stared wide-eyed, some clutching their hats tighter, others stepping back as though afraid they were witnessing something unnatural. The beast that no whip, no rope, no weapon could control had bowed before a man they had scorned. Sheriff Jonas's eyes narrowed. His jaw twitched, but he forced himself to stay still. "What in God's name?" Thomas muttered, his voice barely audible. "He's bewitched it," another spat, though his voice shook. "He must have." Elias said nothing. He remained still, one hand resting on the post, his lips moving in that soft whisper. Ironhide breathed slow, steady, his chest rising and falling with a calmness none had seen before. The fury that had rattled the pen minutes earlier was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. And then, just as quietly as he had come, Elias turned. His eyes did not meet the men who gawked at him, nor did his mouth twist into pride. He simply stepped away, his coat brushing the dust, his stride unhurried as though nothing at all had happened. He left the square in silence, the bull watching him until his shadow disappeared into the dark. The men remained frozen, caught between fear and wonder, unable to explain what they had seen. Jonas's voice finally broke the stillness, low and cold. "Don't be fooled," he said, though his words sounded brittle even to himself. "That man's nothing but trouble." But the sheriff's authority felt thinner than before, stretched by the weight of the moment. The men exchanged uncertain glances, some nodding, others biting their lips. For the first time in weeks, Ironhide was quiet, but peace did not return to Blackthorn Hollow. It was replaced by something heavier, a different kind of tension that cut deeper than fear. If Elias Thorne, the outcast they had ignored, mocked, and dismissed, could face the beast without flinching, what did that mean for the rest of them? The men stood frozen, unable to explain what they had seen. Some claimed Elias knew magic, others muttered that he was cursed, but no one understood why Ironhide had not attacked. Only Elias, with a strange calmness, walked away without looking back. The town's fear now shifted into a different kind of tension. If this outcast could face the beast, what did that mean for them? The morning after the strange encounter, Blackthorn Hollow was restless. Men filled the tavern before the sun had climbed high, their voices low but urgent as they retold what they had witnessed. The story shifted with every retelling. Some swore Elias had sung to the bull, others claimed he had cast a spell, and a few insisted they had seen fire in his eyes. The truth had become slippery, wrapped in exaggeration, yet every version circled back to the same fact. Ironhide had bowed to him. Sheriff Jonas Crow sat at the corner table, a mug untouched in his hand. His deputies spoke around him, feeding the rumor mill with grim looks and muttered warnings, but Jonas barely listened. His pride, the authority he had built over years of ruling the town with a steady hand, had been shaken. Men no longer looked to him for calm when fear gripped them. They looked toward the memory of Elias standing firm before the beast. Jonas's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around the mug's handle. He could not allow a beggar, a man without a roof over his head, to command more respect than the law itself. When Elias appeared on the main street later that morning, carrying nothing but a ragged satchel slung over one shoulder, Jonas was ready. The sheriff stepped forward, boots thudding against the packed dirt, and blocked Elias's path. Townsfolk paused to watch, curiosity gleaming in their eyes. "What trick did you pull with that bull?" Jonas demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. His stance was wide, hand hovering near his revolver, his eyes narrowing as though daring Elias to answer wrong. Elias's expression barely shifted. His shoulders sagged beneath the weight of exhaustion, yet there was a calmness in his eyes that unsettled those who watched. He gave the faintest of smiles, small enough to look almost tired, and shook his head slowly. "No trick," Elias said softly, his voice carrying just enough to be heard. "Just a name he remembers." A silence fell over the crowd. Whispers rose like the rustle of leaves in a restless wind. Some men frowned, confused by the answer, while others exchanged uneasy glances as though the words carried some hidden meaning. Jonas scoffed, though the sound came out forced. He spat into the dirt and squared his shoulders again. "Nonsense. Animals don't remember names. You're lying." But the unease in his eyes betrayed him. Elias did not argue. He stepped around the sheriff, continuing his slow walk down the street. Jonas turned, watching him go, his hands clenching into fists. Behind him, the townsfolk murmured again, their voices uncertain. Authority was slipping, and Jonas felt it like a crack running through glass, silent but spreading. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, Jonas summoned a group of men he trusted most. They met in the dim glow of the sheriff's office lantern, the wood walls creaking as though listening in. Jonas's voice was low but sharp with anger. "He's playing you all for fools," Jonas said. "That bull isn't calm, it's bewitched. And Elias Thorne is the one pulling the strings. We'll prove it." The men nodded uneasily. One asked, "How?" Jonas's answer was cold. "We put him in the pen. If the beast is tame, he'll survive. If not, then we'll know what he really is." The following evening, a crowd gathered once more. Word had spread quickly, carried on whispers through the tavern and market. Men, women, and even children stood at the edges of the pen, eyes bright with morbid curiosity. Torches flickered against the dark, shadows stretching long across the ground. Elias was brought forward, not by force, but by quiet insistence. His expression revealed no fear, only weariness, as though he had known this moment was coming. Jonas stood proudly at the front, his chest puffed, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "You say it was no trick? Then prove it," Jonas declared. Step into the pen. Let's see if the beast still bows. The crowd stirred, some eager, some fearful. Elias said nothing at first. He looked at the bull who stomped within the pen, snorting clouds of steam. Then he looked at the crowd, at their eyes, wide with suspicion and hunger for spectacle. He sighed, adjusted the strap of his satchel, and stepped through the gate. Gasps erupted. Ironhide swung his massive head, hooves tearing at the ground. The air thrummed with tension, the beast's strength visible in every muscle. Jonas's smirk deepened, convinced this would end the way he wanted. But Elias only raised a hand, palm out, and whispered. The sound was soft, nearly swallowed by the crackle of torches. But Ironhide froze. His breathing slowed, nostrils flaring as his massive head lowered inch by inch until it nearly touched the dirt. The bull's great body shuddered once, then stilled, his eyes calm in the firelight. The crowd gasped as one. Some stepped back, clutching their coats, while others leaned forward, unable to look away. A child's voice carried over the silence, trembling. He listens to him. Jonas's smirk vanished. His jaw tightened, and his face reddened with fury. Elias lowered his hand, the whisper fading. He stood in the center of the pen, the bull bowed before him, the image burning itself into the minds of every man present. Slowly he turned, his expression unreadable, and walked toward the gate. The crowd parted without a word, clearing his path. The sheriff's authority had cracked again, but Jonas was not a man to admit defeat. The following days saw his whispers spread through the town like poison. He spoke to men in corners of the tavern, to farmers in their fields, to anyone who would listen. Hat beggars controlling the bull, Jonas warned. He's cursing the town. You've seen it yourselves. Ironhide bows like a servant. What happens when Elias decides to turn him on us? What happens when he unleashes the beast on our homes? Fear, already a familiar guest in Blackthorn Hollow, took root once more. Some men agreed, muttering darkly about curses and control. Others shook their heads, uncertain, but the sheriff's words lingered in their minds. The town grew divided, half in awe of Elias, half suspicious of him. For Elias, life became heavier. He could feel the stares that followed him, the unease that clung to the air wherever he went. One evening, as he sat alone near the stables, the young stable hand Rowan Pike approached him. Rowan's face was pale, his hands restless at his sides. "Is it true?" Rowan asked quietly, his voice breaking. "That you control him?" Elias looked at the boy, then at Ironhide resting peacefully in the pen. His eyes softened, and he shook his head. "No," Elias said. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of memory. "He isn't controlled. He remembers. Once, long ago, he was mine. I raised him when he was young, when I still had a place in this world. He remembers the name I gave him, the voice that cared for him. That's all." Rowan blinked, his breath catching. "Yours? You mean Ironhide belonged to you?" Elias nodded slowly. His gaze drifted to the bull, whose eyes reflected the lantern light with quiet recognition. "Yes, even after years apart he remembers, more faithfully than most men." Rowan's chest tightened with wonder, but also with fear. He understood then why the bull had bowed, but also why the sheriff would never let Elias stay. The revelation brought Elias no comfort. He knew that secrets once spoken carried danger. If Jonas learned the truth, he would twist it into something darker. And already, rumors of curses and weapons spread like wildfire. That night, Rowan watched Elias walk into the shadows, the bull's calm presence lingering behind him. In his heart, the boy knew the truth. But truth was fragile in Blackthorn Hollow, easily crushed beneath fear. The days ahead would not bring gratitude for Elias's gift. They would bring danger. The twist came when Elias revealed to a young stable hand named Rowan that Ironhide once belonged to him, years before he lost everything. The bull had remembered him, even after years apart. This secret, however, was not protection. It made Elias a target. Jonas swore that if Elias did not leave town, both he and the bull would be destroyed. Posters hammered into wooden posts flapped in the morning wind, their black letters stark against the pale sky. "Ironhide will be put down. Safety for all. Witness the end of fear." Men read the words aloud to each other in the marketplace, nodding grimly as though they had been promised salvation. But behind the promise lay Jonas Crow's scheme. The sheriff had not arranged the spectacle for safety. He had built it to crush Elias before the eyes of every man in Blackthorn Hollow. By midday, the entire town pressed into the arena, a wide ring of packed dirt encircled by rough-hewn planks. The air hummed with the uneasy chatter of men who longed for the show to begin, not because they wished to see justice, but because fear made them hungry for reassurance. Torches burned though the sun was still high, their smoke curling upward into the restless sky. Elias was dragged forward through the crowd, his wrists bound with coarse rope. He did not struggle, but his steps were heavy, his boots leaving faint trails in the dust. Whispers chased him, some pitying, others cruel. His hair hung loose over his brow, shadowing eyes that remained calm despite the humiliation Jonas meant to brand upon him. Jonas walked at his side, his voice booming loud enough for all to hear. Today, Blackthorn Hollow will be freed of its terror. No more whispers of curses. No more fears of beasts bowing to strange men. You will see the truth for yourselves. The sheriff's words were polished, each syllable crafted to sting Elias's name. He strode into the center of the arena, pulling Elias forward by the rope, then pointed to the heavy gate at the far end. The gate groaned open, and Ironhide was dragged into view. Chains clinked around his neck and flanks, each link thick as a man's wrist. The bull bellowed, his eyes wild, his hooves slamming into the dirt with thunderous weight. The sound of the beast's fury rattled through the wooden stands, making men shift uneasily in their seats. Jonas turned to the crowd, raising his arm high. Here is your proof. The beast is no friend. He is a danger chained only by iron, waiting to destroy us all. And the man you fear stands beside me, claiming to tame him. So let us test the truth. If Elias Thorne truly commands this monster, then he must tame him now, before every one of you. If he fails, they both die. The murmur of the crowd grew louder, fear mixing with excitement. Men leaned forward, eager to see the outcome, while others crossed their arms, uneasy at the cruelty but unwilling to speak against it. Jonas shoved Elias toward the center of the arena. The rope around his wrists was cut, but no freedom came with it, only expectation. The sheriff smirked, his teeth flashing in the torchlight. Step forward, beggar, Jonas said. Prove your so-called gift, or meet your end. Elias drew a slow breath, steadying his thoughts. His heart hammered, not for himself, but for the beast that stood bound and trembling with rage. He could feel the weight of every eye upon him, their judgment pressing as heavily as the chains upon Ironhide. He walked into the center of the ring, dust swirling around his boots. Ironhide roared, yanking against the chains, muscles straining as the handlers struggled to hold him. The ground trembled beneath his weight. For a moment, fear rippled through the stands. Jonas smiled, certain that the beggar would falter. But Elias lifted his hand. He did not shout. He did not gesture with grand flair. He simply whispered, low and steady, the name only Ironhide remembered. The effect was instant. The bull's hooves slowed. His snorting softened into deep, steady breaths. His head lowered, his massive frame sinking into stillness as though the sound had reached deep inside his chest. The chains clinked loosely as the beast stopped resisting, eyes softening in recognition. A gasp tore through the crowd, followed by silence. Men who had expected blood and chaos now stared in disbelief. Children clutched their fathers' coats, whispering in awe. Elias stepped closer, resting a hand gently upon Ironhide's brow. Easy, old friend, he murmured. The bull shuddered once, then stood calm, bowing beneath the weight of memory and trust. Jonas's face twisted, his triumph cracking into rage. His plan, built upon humiliation, was unraveling before the crowd. He had promised fear's end, yet here stood proof that fear had never been needed. His authority trembled with every heartbeat of silence that stretched across the arena. Lies! Jonas shouted suddenly, his voice sharp with fury. He waved his arm at the men stationed along the fence. He's cursed it! Don't you see? The beast is his weapon! Kill it! Now! For a moment, the command stunned the crowd. Then, with drilled obedience, Jonas's allies lifted crossbows from their posts. The creak of drawn strings filled the air. Elias spun, eyes wide, realizing what was about to happen. No! He shouted, his voice breaking against the roar of fear. He threw himself between the bull and the archers, arms spread wide. The crossbows loosed. Arrows hissed through the air. One sliced across Elias's arm, blood streaking down his sleeve, but he held his ground, shielding Ironhide with his body. The bull bellowed, fury awakened. Chains snapped taut, then broke with a shattering clang. Ironhide surged forward, dust exploding beneath his hooves. The handlers dove aside, scattering like leaves in a storm. The crowd screamed, chaos erupting. Men clambered over one another to reach the exits, torches falling and scattering sparks. But Ironhide was not rampaging blindly, his eyes fixed upon Jonas. The sheriff stumbled back, shock flickering into terror. He reached for his pistol, fumbling with the holster, but too late. Ironhide charged with unstoppable force, horns lowered. The ground shook as the beast struck, lifting Jonas from his feet with brutal power. The sheriff's cry was lost beneath the thunder of impact. Dust hung heavy in the air, and silence fell again, broken only by the bull's snorting breaths. Jonas lay crumpled, motionless, his pistol scattered in the dirt. Elias, blood dripping from his arm, turned to face the panicked crowd. His chest heaved with pain and exhaustion, but his voice carried strong. You see the truth. He is no curse. He is no weapon. He is a guardian. You feared him because you were told to fear him. But he harmed none of you. He only struck at the one who sought to destroy him." The crowd hesitated, torn between fear and the evidence before their eyes. They had seen Elias take an arrow to shield the bull. They had seen Ironhide stand calmly at his side. Doubt gnawed at the lies Jonas had woven. Ironhide moved to Elias's side, towering yet still, his body angled protectively toward the man. In that moment, the image was unmistakable. Not monster and master, but companions bound by trust. Yet even as awe rippled through the crowd, dark eyes watched from the shadows. Jonas's closest allies, men who had built their power under his reign, clenched their fists in fury. The sheriff might have fallen, but his loyal men still breathed vengeance. And as Elias laid his hand once more upon Ironhide's neck, he knew the battle was not over. The beast had been spared, but the town's fear had only changed shape. Where Jonas had fallen, others would rise to take his place, and their wrath would be aimed not just at him, but at the bond he shared with Ironhide. The arena erupted into screams and panic, but the crowd had seen the truth with their own eyes. Elias had not cursed them. He had protected them. Ironhide, standing by Elias's side, seemed less a monster and more a guardian. But the sheriff's allies were not done. They swore vengeance, and Elias realized his struggle was far from over. Whispers filled Blackthorn Hollow like restless wind through dry grass. Men leaned over fences, spoke in taverns, and gathered in the market square, their voices low but urgent. "The bull bowed to him," they said, "like a knight bending to his king." The tale spread quickly, retold with wide eyes and careful gestures, as though even speaking the truth carried weight. What had once been mockery of a wandering beggar had turned into awe, and Elias Thorne's name was no longer spoken with scorn, but with uneasy reverence. Yet even as the whispers grew, so did the shadows of doubt. Sheriff Jonas Crow, broken and bloodied from Ironhide's charge, survived long enough to weave one last venomous tale from his bed. With rasping breath, he told those who still gathered near him that Elias had no intention of protecting the town, that he meant to use the bull to rule over them. The words, heavy with bitterness, spread through the cracks of the hollow like poison poured into a well. The result was division. Some men spat at the ground when Elias passed, muttering that he was no better than Jonas had claimed. Others, shaken by what they had seen in the arena, looked at him with respect, their eyes lingering not on him but on the beast that walked at his side. The town was caught between fear and admiration, torn in two by rumor and truth. Elias felt the weight of both with every step. He did not seek the eyes of others, nor did he answer every whisper. His nights were restless, his arm bandaged from the arrow's cut, and his thoughts often wandered to the same question. Had fate brought Ironhide back to him only to tear them apart again? One afternoon, as the sun hung heavy over the rooftops, a group of farmers approached him near the edge of the market square. Their boots were muddy, their faces lined by years of toil, but their eyes held an unfamiliar deference. The oldest among them, a man named Darren Holt, removed his hat and cleared his throat. "Elias," Darren said, his voice low but steady, "we've seen how he listens to you. How did you earn his trust? A beast like that doesn't bow for nothing." Elias studied the men before him. They were not seeking entertainment. They were seeking understanding. His shoulders eased as he replied, "He was mine once. When I still had a home, a family. I raised him from a calf, fed him with my own hands. When I lost everything, I lost him too. But beasts remember what men forget. Ironhide never turned from me, though the world did." The farmers exchanged glances, their expressions softening. For the first time, Elias felt the sharp edge of suspicion dull. Darren nodded slowly, hat turning in his calloused hands. "Then maybe we judged you wrong," he admitted. Word spread again, but this time it was not of fear. Men began to say Elias had not bewitched the bull but had raised him, cared for him, and been remembered for it. Ironhide's image shifted from a monster to a misunderstood guardian. Where once the beast's roar had driven men to clutch their weapons, now it stirred something different, pride, even courage. But not all hearts were swayed. In the dim corners of taverns, Jonas's allies whispered. They spoke of the sheriff's warning, repeating his tale until belief hardened into resentment. To them, Elias was still a danger, a man whose bond with Ironhide could tip the balance of power in the hollow. They watched, waited, and plotted. The days passed with an uneasy calm. Elias found brief peace in tending to Ironhide's pen on the edge of town, repairing the rails with rough-hewn wood, speaking softly to the bull as he worked. At times, he almost allowed himself to believe that things had changed, that the hollow might learn to live without fear. But the air remained heavy with unspoken tension, like the sky before a storm. The storm came quietly. It was near midnight when Elias woke to a sound that sliced through his sleep, a deep, distant roar. It was not the sound of rage but of warning, a call that reached into his bones. He bolted upright, heart pounding, and snatched the lantern from his table. Its weak flame flickered as he ran through the dark streets, boots striking against the dirt road. The roar came again, closer this time. Elias's breath caught as he rounded the final bend and saw the pen. In the pale wash of moonlight, shadows moved, men scattering, stumbling, their faces pale with terror. The wooden rails lay broken, but not by horns. Ironhide stood within, massive and immovable, his head lowered, breath steaming in the night air. The men lay sprawled in the dirt, trampled by hooves that had not pierced, but pressed just enough to send them sprawling in panic. Elias froze at the sight. These men had come to kill, yet Ironhide had chosen restraint. The bull had frightened them away without shedding blood, as though he understood what Elias himself had not yet admitted. He was no longer just a beast, but something larger, something the town itself needed. One of the attackers, clutching his ribs, scrambled to his feet and fled into the shadows, his eyes wide with a fear deeper than death. The others limped after him, silent and broken by what they had faced. Elias stepped forward slowly, lantern trembling in his hand. He placed it down and reached for Ironhide's massive brow, his fingers brushing the rough hair. "You could have killed them," he whispered, voice thick with awe. "But you didn't." Ironhide exhaled, warm breath washing over Elias's arm, steady and calm. In that moment, Elias understood. Ironhide was no longer his, not in the way he had been when raised in his youth. The bond remained, yes, but the purpose had shifted. The beast had become a guardian, not for one man but for all. To keep him tethered only to himself would be selfish, a chain far heavier than iron. At dawn, Elias stood before the townspeople gathered in the square. His bandaged arm hung at his side, and his voice carried the weight of decision. "You feared him," Elias began, nodding toward the edge of town where Ironhide's silhouette rose against the morning sky. "And I do not blame you. Fear blinds men. But you have seen the truth. He is no curse, no monster. He is a protector. Last night men came with blades to kill him, and he did not strike them down. He chose mercy where others would have chosen blood. That is no beast. That is strength tempered with wisdom." The men shifted, unease giving way to silence. Elias's gaze swept over them, firm and steady. "I will not stay," he continued. "Ironhide does not belong to me. He belongs to this place now. You need a symbol of courage, not a reminder of fear. I was his keeper once, but now he is yours. Guard him, and he will guard you." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some voices protesting softly, others nodding with reluctant acceptance. Elias did not linger to hear more. He turned, his steps carrying him down the dusty road that wound out of Blackthorn Hollow. The morning sun stretched long shadows across his path. Behind him, Ironhide stood tall within the pen, silent and unblinking. The bull's eyes followed him, steady and watchful, until distance blurred man and beast into memory. The townspeople remained in the square, staring after the lone figure walking away and the silent guardian who remained. In that stillness, they understood they had witnessed something rare, something beyond fear or rumor. A man and beast bound by memory, respect, and survival. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores powerful themes of empathy, unexpected connections, and the profound bonds that can form between those who are often overlooked by society. This narrative aims to highlight that true understanding transcends fear, and that compassion can be found in the most unlikely of places.